Hey, what's up? This is John, and today I'm going to be doing a review for one of my favorite discs from Terror Vision. Today we're going to be talking about The Jar. Just to say up front, I have done a bunch of work for Terror Vision, including editing interviews and trailers and stuff like that, and I did do some of the special features on this release, but I'm super proud to have been a part of this release and genuinely love this movie and just want to be another dude helping spread the good word about The Jar.
You've just got to realize that it's in you, and you can control it.
So The Jar is a movie from 1984 that depicts, in a very surreal way, a man's slow descent into madness. Our main character, Paul, meets a strange old man in the middle of the night when the two of them get into a car accident. The old man is scared to go to the hospital, so Paul brings him back to his house, but very shortly after, the man disappears, leaving only a mysterious package behind. What follows this is an odyssey of powerful and crazy imagery, hallucinations, and bizarre encounters. There's a type of mood and imagery that wouldn't be out of place in a movie by David Lynch, or honestly even one by Ingmar Bergman. And there's a definite influence from Dario Argento, particularly Suspiria, which is shown in the type of lighting they often choose. This is the kind of movie that 50% of the audience might not be all that into, but the other 50% are gonna go all in for. So The Jar's had a pretty rough go of it for the last 40 years.
God damn it! It's got to stop! It's got to stop doing this!
Sorry?
The movie never had a theatrical release, and even though it was super ambitious and really well shot, it was dumped on video and released by the company Magnum Entertainment. I'm sure they didn't have a clue what to do with this movie because it's kind of a hybrid between horror and the artsy-fartsy.
A dream within a dream.
So Magnum just gave it the 80s video store horror approach. For instance, the movie was originally titled Sharon, which is the guy who leads souls across the river Styx, and they changed that, obviously, to The Jar. They added some kind of goofy cover art of the jar spilling out and a monster coming out, and then added the tagline to it, "It blows the lid off terror." And then the pan and scan presentation cropped the wide image pretty severely, and the picture was just pretty muddy.
And it's horrible. So horrible.
And this combination takes a movie that's a little bit hard to understand and makes it pretty incomprehensible.
Do you know where you're going?
So it's not hard to understand why the folks on Red Letter Media dropped The Jar into acetate and watched it disintegrate after their viewing of it, but what they saw then is not what we're seeing in the new presentation today. So now, for the first time ever, the movie has been restored from its original camera negative. It's finally presented in its original aspect ratio, which is a super wide 235:1, and the picture's cleaned up really nicely. You can finally tell how gorgeous the imagery is in the movie and see how consistently it's filled with really interesting shots. Besides the crazy visuals, the score to The Jar is gonna knock your socks off. It's a really simple but powerful synthesizer score that I think folks who enjoy stuff like Tangerine Dream and John Carpenter are really likely to enjoy. And it definitely plays a huge part in how hypnotic the entire experience of the movie is. The duo that composed and performed this electronic score is actually the director Bruce Toscano and the director of photography Cameron McLeod, listed only in the credits as Obscure Size. And I'm pretty sure this is the only work of theirs that currently exists. I know that when Brad at Terror Vision was trying to get this movie signed, one of the first things he brought up to the director was just how killer the score was.
It's insane.
And I think it's one aspect of The Jar that it's always been easy for people to be into because it's the one thing that kind of never suffered as much as anything else from that initial poor presentation on VHS. I think it's pretty likely that people who are fans of this movie really dig the score, and that, like for me, it's a major reason why this movie works so well. There are a good amount of extras on this release. One of the things that I assembled was the stills gallery. I know that a lot of people don't jump to the stills gallery right away when you're looking at special features, and that obviously commentaries and interviews are gonna be first priority, but just make sure if you pick up the jar that the stills gallery is something that you don't skip. I think if this movie feels like it exists outside of time and feels kind of otherworldly, the most 1980s thing about this whole package is the stills gallery. It's a really good opportunity to see some of the behind the scenes special effects, some of the elaborate filmmaking setups, and just people having fun. There's a bunch of stuff in the stills gallery that didn't even make it into the movie, and that includes creature special effects and an entire sequence that takes place in a graveyard. The main documentary piece on this release, which was cut by Jack Perez, who is a filmmaker who has a bunch of titles out from TerrorVision himself, including Some Guy Who Kills People and America's Deadliest Home Video. His piece is featuring the director Bruce Toscano, the writer George Bradley, and the star Gary Wallace. And it's interesting to hear them all talk about how disappointing this initial VHS release was, and how it even led to the director Bruce Toscano pretty much hanging up his hat and quitting filmmaking.
I turned off art, I turned off film, and I went off and basically started working for the man and just admonished filmmaking. I think it was a long time before I actually ever went to see films again in a theater.
And that is obviously super unfortunate. It just makes me wonder, what were we deprived of by this guy quitting filmmaking? Because I think if the movie had been presented the way it was intended in the first place, and maybe also had a little bit better sound design and a little bit less ADR, I think this movie would have had a pretty good chance at becoming a cult hit, something along the similar lines to like Eraserhead. Another wild thing to note about this release is that in the 40 years of existence, not even the filmmakers themselves had ever seen this movie presented the way it was meant to be seen. Because before 2023, there was no theatrical presentation of this movie ever. So it's been really cool to see over the last year some film programmers get together with some small theaters, and in some cases selling these theaters out to excited audiences who are ready to check out the jar. Another feature on the disc is that Gary Wallace, the star, is in attendance at one of the screenings in Chicago at the Music Box, and he does a Q&A afterward explaining that this was his first experience seeing the movie this way.
It's very nice.
Thank you.
I know that when movies get restored and re-released and put on physical media again, that they get this sort of new life. But I feel like with The Jar, it's even more special than that. This is a movie that has basically been reborn and is finally able to be seen the way it was intended for the first time in its 40-year existence. And like I said, I think it finally has a shot to achieve the cult status that I think it always deserved. So I know I didn't go into a ton of details on the story here. I don't think that's necessarily gonna spoil anything. I also don't necessarily think it's gonna help. The Jar is something that you have to experience yourself.
Whatever it is, look at it directly. Look at yourself. Always keep that. Look at who you are.
Thanks for checking out this review of The Jar. If you've seen The Jar, please let me know down below. Let me know too if this review got you interested in checking it out. I'll leave some links down below to the TerrorVision site where you can pick up a copy if you want to. Please give this video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to the channel. Thanks again for watching, and I will see you next time.